I never thought I'd be telling this story. Not to anyone. There's a certain stoicism bred into a man after 30 years in the military, a learned instinct to pack your vulnerabilities away like old uniforms. But there comes a point when silence is its own kind of burden. So, here it is. The whole unvarnished truth about how I nearly married the wrong woman, and the day I decided to rewrite the ending of her script. My name is Arthur Vance, 55 years old, a retired Army colonel, and until recently, I believed I was one of the luckiest men in Charleston. 7 years have passed since I lost my wife Eleanor to the slow, merciless thief that is cancer. In her absence, I had resigned myself to a quiet life alone in the house we'd bought together on Sullivan's Island. It's a nice place, 3 bedrooms with a wraparound porch and a view of the Atlantic that can steal the air from your lungs on a clear morning. Eleanor had called it our forever house. I suppose she was right, in a way. I intended to stay there forever, surrounded by the ghost of her laughter and the scent of the gardenias she'd planted. I had been comfortable, but a deep, gnawing loneliness had set in. That's the thing about spending half your life with someone. When they're gone, the silence isn't just an absence of sound. It's a presence, a heavy blanket that smothers everything. The house felt cavernous, my footsteps echoing in rooms that once rang with conversation. Then, Serafina Croft walked into my life. It was at a charity gala for veterans, one of those stuffy affairs I usually endure rather than enjoy. She was a volunteer, serving drinks, her honey blonde hair catching the light as she laughed with the guests. She was 38, she told me later, young enough to turn heads but with a maturity in her eyes that made me feel like an equal, not some creepy old man trying to recapture his youth. She had this incredible gift, a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room worth talking to. She approached me as I was nursing a club soda by the silent auction table. "You look like you could use something stronger than that," she'd said, a playful glint in her blue eyes as she nodded at my glass. I managed a smile. "Designated driver tonight." "Noble of you." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But who takes care of the noble man, I wonder?" That was 18 months ago. For a year and a half, I thought I'd hit a lottery I didn't even know I was playing. Second chances don't come around often at my age, and this one felt like a miracle. Sarah was vivacious, intelligent, and seemed to understand the parts of me that had been dormant for years. She listened to my old war stories, not with polite patience, but with genuine fascination. She encouraged me to take up sailing again, something I hadn't done since Eleanor got sick. She filled the house with life, with music, with the scent of her perfume instead of the faint, lingering scent of potpourri and memory. When she said yes to my proposal 6 months ago, on the very porch where Eleanor and I used to watch the sunrise, I felt like a man half my age. The ring, a princess-cut diamond I'd spent a small fortune on, looked as if it were forged for her hand. I was euphoric, blind, and utterly devoted. Looking back, of course, the signs were all there, like small, insidious cracks in a perfect facade. But when you want something to be real badly enough, you can be blind to a lot of things. Our first date had been at a small Italian place on King Street. I remember being nervous, my social skills feeling rusty and antiquated. Sarah wore a sapphire blue dress that matched her eyes, and without a glance at the prices, ordered the most expensive wine on the menu. "We're celebrating new beginnings," she declared with a toast. When the check came, she made a show of reaching for her purse, but her movements were so deliberately slow, so theatrical, that I had already placed my credit card on the tray. "Next time's on me," she'd promise with a wink that made my heart skip a beat. There never was a next time on her. There was always some plausible, perfectly pitched excuse. She'd forgotten her wallet in her other handbag. Her bank had put a temporary hold on her credit card due to a suspicious charge. Or, the most effective one, she just paid an enormous bill for her mother's ongoing and vaguely defined medical treatments, a story that always elicited my immediate sympathy. I didn't mind. I had a comfortable pension and savings. Seeing her smile, free from worry, was worth every penny. Or so I told myself. After 3 months of dating, she started dropping hints about moving in. "That drive from my place to yours gets so tiresome," she'd sigh, tracing patterns on my chest as we lay in bed. "And it's just silly to pay rent on my apartment when I spend most nights here anyway." It made perfect sense. I was a fool in love. Logic was my servant, not my master. I invited her to move in the next day. She had her things packed and ready within hours. Surprisingly little for someone who always dressed so impeccably, just 2 large suitcases and a few boxes. Later, I would find out the truth. She'd been living with her mother all along, The apartment was just a convenient fiction, a prop in her elaborate play. The changes to my house were subtle at first. A new throw pillow here, different curtains there. Then came the larger pieces. A new sofa because mine was so outdated, darling. A different dining set because the old one, a sturdy oak table where Eleanor and I had shared thousands of meals, didn't match the coastal chic aesthetic she was going for. I conceded on most things, eager to build a shared space, a new life. I drew the line when she suggested renovating the master bathroom. "It's just so old-fashioned, Arthur," she'd complained, wrinkling her nose at the clawfoot tub Eleanor had adored. "We could put in a beautiful glass walk-in shower, maybe some marble." That tub was where Eleanor had soaked to ease the pain in her bones during her final months. It was sacred ground. "It stays," I'd said, my voice firm in a way that surprised us both. It was one of the few times I'd put my foot down. She'd pouted for days, a cold silence descending between us, but she eventually conceded. Looking back, I realized she was just biding her time. Why fight over a bathroom when she was playing the long game for the whole house? There were other things, small dissonances in the symphony she composed. The way she always seemed to run into old friends whenever we were out, usually attractive men, who looked at her a bit too long, whose hands lingered on her arm a bit too familiarly. She'd introduced me proudly as her fiancée, but there was something performative about it, as if she were showing off a prize rather than connecting two parts of her life. Once, looking for my car keys in her purse, I found a receipt for a hotel room. When I asked about it, she'd laughed it off with practiced ease. "Oh, that! A little girl's weekend with friends from college. Didn't I tell you about that?" My memory is a sieve sometimes. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. The alternative was too dark to contemplate. Then there were the mysterious phone calls she'd take on the porch, her voice dropping to hushed tones, ending abruptly the moment I approached. "Just my mother," she'd say, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "She's having trouble with her new medication again." Always her mother. Always a crisis that required my sympathy, and often, my money. It was 3 days before our wedding when everything fell apart. Or maybe that's when everything finally came together, depending on your perspective. I'd just come from my final suit fitting, a charcoal gray affair that I felt rather dapper in. I decided to surprise Sarah. She was staying at her mother's house until the wedding, insisting it was for tradition's sake. I stopped at a florist on King Street and picked up a bouquet of white peonies, her favorite. As I drove the 20 minutes to the old Victorian where her mother lived, I felt a swell of contentment. The air was warm, hanging heavy with the scent of jasmine and the droning song of cicadas. It was a perfect Charleston evening. I parked a little down the street, thinking I'd sneak up and surprise her through the kitchen window. The lights were on, and the window was cracked open to let in the evening breeze. I was about 10 feet from the porch when I heard their voices, clear as day, floating out into the humid night air. "Don't worry so much, Mom. Everything's going according to plan." It was Sarah's voice, but it had a tone I'd never heard before. It was harder, sharper, stripped of the warmth she usually draped it in. "I just don't like playing with fire, honey. Arthur seems like such a decent man." I froze, the bouquet hanging limply at my side. "Decent, sure," Sarah scoffed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Decent house, decent pension, decent life insurance policy. It's all very decent." The way she said the word made it sound like something disgusting she'd scraped off her shoe. "And what if he wants a prenup? He's not stupid, Serafina." A sharp, humorless laugh. "Already handled." I've been dropping little comments for months about how prenups are so unromantic, how they're for people who don't really believe in forever. He ate it up with a spoon. My blood went cold. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. "And if he finds out about Julian?" Her mother sounded nervous. "He won't. Julian knows to lay low until after the wedding. Once I'm Mrs. Arthur Vance, it gets a lot harder for him to cut me out, even if things go south. South Carolina isn't exactly friendly to quickie divorces. I just don't want you to end up like me, that's all. Left with nothing but a child to raise." "Mom, please. He's not Dad. Arthur's a total Boy Scout, honorable to a fault. The man actually tears up during the national anthem, for God's sake. He's the perfect mark." The flowers fell from my hand, thudding softly onto the grass. I must have made a sound, because there was a sudden silence from inside. "Did you hear something?" her mother asked. "Probably just the neighbor's cat," Sarah replied dismissively. "Anyway, as I was saying, a year from now, who knows? Maybe widowhood will suit me. I hear life insurance pays out more for accidents than natural causes. Something to keep in mind. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over a garden gnome. Widowhood? The word echoed in the silent chambers of my heart. This wasn't just about money. This was monstrous. I didn't wait to hear more. I walked back to my truck in a daze, my mind a maelstrom of shock and betrayal. The peonies lay forgotten on the grass, their pristine white petals already beginning to brown at the edges in the oppressive summer heat. By the time I got home, the shock had curdled into a cold, hard rage I hadn't felt since my days in combat. The lovesick fool was gone. In his place stood a colonel who had just been handed enemy intelligence. And the colonel knew exactly what to do. The tactical part of my brain, the part that had kept me and my men alive through 2 tours in hostile territory, took command. Confrontation was for amateurs. A strategic victory required patience, information, and overwhelming force. My first act was not to call Sarah, but to open the voice recorder app on my phone. I hadn't formed a full plan yet, but I knew one thing. Evidence never hurts. My second act was to call my sister Clara. She's 5 years younger than me, sharp as a tack, and has never been afraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Arthur, it's almost midnight. Everything okay?" "No." My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. "Can you come over?" 30 minutes later, Clara was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, her face a mask of shock and fury as I recounted what I'd overheard. That conniving little she stopped herself, taking a deep breath. I knew it. I knew there was something off about her. The way she always steered conversations toward your finances, your retirement package. I thought maybe I was just being an overprotective little sister. "Well, you weren't," I said, my voice flat. "The question is, what do I do now?" Clara looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. "What do you mean, what do you do? You call off the wedding, obviously." "Obviously," I agreed. "But that feels too simple. If I just call it off, she walks away clean, free to find some other decent guy to con. Everyone in town will wonder what happened. They'll speculate. Some will blame me. Who cares what people think?" "I care," I said, standing up and walking to the window, looking out at the dark water. "My reputation matters to me, and more than that, I don't want her to get away with this." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then, "What are you thinking, Arthur?" I turned back to face her, a cold smile forming on my lips. "I'm thinking that if Serafina wants a show, I'll give her one she'll never forget." The next morning, while Sarah was at her final dress fitting, blissfully unaware, I put my plan into motion. I drove to her mother's house, timing my visit for when I knew the older woman would be at her weekly bridge game. Using the spare key Sarah had given me for emergencies, I let myself in. The house was quiet, smelling faintly of dust and lavender. I went straight to the guest room where Sarah had been staying. It didn't take long. In the closet, behind a stack of shoeboxes, I found a locked metal cash box. The key, amateurishly, was hidden inside a sachet of potpourri in her underwear drawer. Inside was a con artist playbook. There were financial statements showing significant debt, letters from collection agencies, and a small notebook. It contained meticulous notes on me, my routines, my preferences, my assets, even the names of my closest friends. But it also had similar information on other men. Mark Stevens, age 62, widower, owns construction company. James Harper, 58, divorced, investment banker. And then I saw his name. Julian Thorne, 42, married but unhappy, owns 3 car dealerships. The notebook contained copies of text messages between Sarah and Julian, a crude timeline that showed their relationship went back at least 2 years, well before she'd ever met me. As I was replacing the box, a business card that had fallen behind the dresser caught my eye. I picked it up. Valerie Shaw, Special Investigator, South Carolina Department of Financial Crimes. On the back was a handwritten note. "Call me before it's too late. Someone else had been on to her." This changed everything. Back in my truck, my heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and vindication, I called the number on the card. "Special Investigator Shaw," a crisp female voice answered. "My name is Arthur Vance," I said. "I believe you have been looking into someone named Serafina Croft." There was a pause. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice careful. "I've been hoping you'd call. Do you have time to meet today?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop. Valerie Shaw was a stern-looking woman in her 40s, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Serafina Croft isn't her real name," she told me. "It's Elizabeth Moretti. She's wanted for questioning in 3 states for fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. She laid it all out. Her modus operandi was always the same. Find wealthy, vulnerable men, gain their trust, marry them, and then clean them out. She often worked with a partner, a man named Julian Thorne, who would pose as the other man to create drama and distract from her financial maneuvers. The stories about her mother's medical bills were a complete fabrication. I told Detective Shaw everything I'd learned, offering to share my recording and the photos of the notebook. It's helpful, she said, but these cases are hard to prove. Victims are often too embarrassed to come forward. We need more to guarantee a conviction. What if I could get her to incriminate herself further? I asked. In front of 200 witnesses? I explained my plan for the wedding. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. It's risky, Mr. Vance, she said when I finished, and highly unorthodox from a law enforcement perspective. But not illegal, I countered. She tapped her pen against her notepad. No, not illegal. If you're determined to go through with this, I'd like to be present. Not officially, you understand, but I can observe. She handed me a small, sophisticated recording device. This is better than your phone. If you're going to do this, do it right. That night, I made the final, crucial call. I'd found Julian Thorne's number in Sarah's notebook. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice wary. Who is this? This is Arthur Vance, I said, my voice calm and even. Seraphina's fiancé, or should I say Elizabeth's? A long silence. I don't know what you're talking about. Save it, Julian. I cut him off. I've seen the texts. I've seen the notebook. What I don't know is whether you're aware she's planning to double-cross you once she gets control of my assets. Your share keeps getting smaller in each draft of her plan. The most recent version doesn't mention you at all. I heard a sharp intake of breath. That lying. He stopped himself. What do you want from me? I want you at my wedding tomorrow. First Presbyterian, 2 p.m. When I give the signal, you walk in. That's all. And why would I do that? Because I've already shared everything I know with Investigator Shaw from Financial Crimes. She'll be there too. If you cooperate, maybe you can cut a deal. If not, I let the threat hang in the air. He sighed heavily, a sound of complete defeat. Fine. But after tomorrow, I'm done with her. Somehow, Julian, I replied, I think she'll be done with both of us. I slept surprisingly well that night. There's a clarity that comes with certainty, even when what you're certain about is painful. The battle plan was set. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and painfully beautiful. I woke, showered, and bypassed the custom-tailored charcoal suit hanging in my closet. Instead, I put on my Army service uniform. The deep blue jacket, the polished brass, the rows of ribbons and medals, this was my armor. This was who I truly was, not the lovesick fool Seraphina thought she had ensnared. By 1:30 p.m., the sanctuary at First Presbyterian was packed. I stood in a side room, peering through a crack in the door, watching as the cream of Charleston society took their seats. My old friend Pete found me there. Damn, Arthur. The uniform. Bold choice, he said, slapping me on the back. Sarah know about the change of plans? She'll find out, I said, adjusting my cuffs. He gave me a strange look but didn't press further. At precisely 2 p.m., the organ began to play. My sister Clara, my best woman, walked down the aisle last. She caught my eye as she took her place, giving me a small, almost imperceptible nod. Everything was in place. Then the music changed. The wedding march. Every head turned. The double doors at the back of the church swung open, and there she was. Seraphina, a vision in white lace and tulle, her arm linked with an uncle's. She was objectively beautiful, her smile radiant, her makeup flawless. If I hadn't known the venom that lay beneath that smile, I might have been moved. As it was, I felt nothing but a cold, hard certainty. She glided down the aisle, her eyes fixed on mine, never wavering. When she reached the altar, her uncle placed her hand in mine. It was cold. We turned to face the pastor. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice resonant in the hushed church. He continued through the opening remarks, his words about love, honor, and fidelity, washing over me like a foreign language. I let him speak, my hand holding Sarah's, feeling her pulse thrumming rapidly against my palm. Excitement, anticipation of victory. If any person can show just cause why these two should not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional pause. The church was silent. The pastor smiled. Then, Arthur Vance, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The moment had arrived. I turned to face Sarah fully, taking both of her hands in mine. Her eyes shone with what anyone else would have mistaken for tears of joy. Before I answer that, I said, my voice carrying easily in the perfect acoustics of the old church, there's something I need to say. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Sarah's smile flickered. Arthur, she whispered, a warning in her tone. What are you doing? I dropped her hands and turned to face our guests. I want to thank you all for coming today. Most of you have known me for years. You know I am a man of my word, a man of honor. That's why what I'm about to do is so difficult, but necessary. Sarah grabbed my arm. Arthur, stop it. You're embarrassing me, she hissed. I gently removed her hand. 3 days ago, I went to surprise my fiancée with flowers. When I arrived at her mother's house, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. The church was dead silent now. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the digital recorder Investigator Shaw had given me. Rather than try to explain, I announced, I think it's best if you hear it for yourselves. Before Sarah could react, I pressed play. Her voice, hard and calculating, filled the sacred space. Don't worry so much, Mom. Everything's going according to plan. Decent house, decent pension, decent life insurance policy. He ate it up with a spoon. Julian knows to lay low until after the wedding. I stopped the recording there. The silence in the church was absolute, heavy with shock. Sarah's face had drained of all color. That's not. It's been edited. It's fake, she sputtered, her voice shrill. Is it? I asked quietly. Is Julian fake too? On cue, the church doors at the back swung open. A tall, dark-haired man in a tailored suit stood there, looking deeply uncomfortable. Julian Thorne. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. Julian, why are you here? He walked slowly down the aisle. I'm sorry, Sarah. When Mr. Vance contacted me yesterday and explained, I couldn't be a part of this anymore. Not when I found out you were planning to cut me out. The guests were openly gawking now, their heads turning back and forth as if watching a tennis match. You contacted him? Sarah whirled on me, her features contorted with rage. You had no right. I had every right, I said calmly. You were planning to commit fraud, to marry me under false pretenses. You don't understand, she floundered, looking desperately around the church for an ally. Her mother, in the front row, had her face in her hands. I understand perfectly, I continued, nodding toward the back of the church. And so does everyone else now, including Special Investigator Shaw from the Department of Financial Crimes. Valerie Shaw stood up from a back pew, holding her badge aloft. Elizabeth Moretti, also known as Serafina Croft, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. You're under investigation for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny across 3 states. A collective gasp swept through the congregation. Sarah turned on the crowd, her composure finally shattering. This is absurd. He's lying. This is just some sick joke because he has cold feet. It's no joke, Elizabeth, I said, pulling out my phone and displaying the pictures of her notebook. I found your playbook. Your plans for me, just like your plans for Mark Stevens and James Harper and all the others. You went through my things, she shrieked, lunging for my phone. But Clara was quicker, stepping between us. Don't even think about it, my sister warned. Sarah backed away, snarling. This isn't over. You'll regret this, all of you. She turned to run, but her path was blocked by 2 uniformed police officers who had been waiting outside. As they read her rights and led her away, a disgraced bride in white lace, the church erupted. I stood still at the altar, watching as years of deception finally caught up with her. The pastor placed a hand on my shoulder. Arthur, I don't know what to say. Don't be sorry, Pastor, I replied, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. A marriage built on lies is no marriage at all. I turned to the stunned congregation. I apologize for the theatrics. The reception at the Charleston Hotel is paid for. Please, go and enjoy yourselves. No sense in letting it go to waste. A stunned silence hung in the air for a moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. Slowly at first, then others joined in. It wasn't celebratory applause. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of respect. I walked down the aisle alone, conscious of hundreds of eyes following me. Outside, the May sunshine was blinding. Investigator Shaw approached me. That was quite a show, Mr. Vance, she said, a hint of respect in her professional tone. With the evidence we have, and Julian's cooperation, she'll be facing serious time. As she walked away, Clara joined me on the steps. Are you okay? Yeah, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. Yeah, I really am. Instead of going to the hotel, I drove to the cemetery. I sat on the bench beside Eleanor's grave, the one I'd had installed so I could talk to her in comfort. You wouldn't believe the day I've had, Ellie, I said softly to the cool granite. Actually, you probably would. You always could spot a phony a mile away. I stayed there for an hour, telling my late wife everything, imagining her sharp, witty advice. By the time I left, the sun was beginning to set. I drove home to Sullivan's Island to my house, not our house, and changed out of my uniform. I grabbed a beer and walked down to the water's edge, kicking off my shoes to feel the sand between my toes. The tide was coming in. I stood there for a long time, watching the water, letting the reality of what had just happened wash over me. The humiliation, the anger, and beneath it all, an overwhelming sense of relief. My phone buzzed constantly in my pocket, with texts and calls. I ignored it. Tonight was for reclaiming my peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard footsteps. It was Clara. The verdict is in, she said, skipping a shell across the water. You're a local hero, Mrs. Harrington from the Garden Club said, sometimes public justice is the only kind that sticks. She told me they had found fake passports and over $50,000 in cash in her mother's attic. She had been planning to run. 6 months later, I testified at Elizabeth Moretti's trial. She didn't look at me once. She was sentenced to 12 years. Her mother received 5 years probation, and Julian, for his cooperation, received a reduced sentence. Detective Shaw called to tell me that my testimony had helped them build cases for 6 other victims across 4 states. You changed things for them, Mr. Vance, she said. The scandal faded, as all scandals do. I slowly rejoined the world. I had friends over for barbecues, started volunteering at the VA hospital again, and even joined a pottery class at the community center. Life went on. I don't know if I'll ever marry again. I'm not closed to the possibility, but I'm content. I have my home, my friends, my community. I have my memories of Eleanor, untarnished by guilt or compromise. And I have my self-respect. In the end, that's what Elizabeth was really after. Not just my money or my house, but my dignity. It was the one thing I refused to give her. Last week, I ran into the pastor's daughter, Janet Williams, at the farmer's market. We talked for a while, and then she invited me to her book club. I surprised myself by saying yes. It's not a date, just a book club, but it's a start. Sometimes the best revenge isn't watching someone pay for what they've done. It's living well in spite of it, moving forward, finding joy in the small things again. Serafina, or Elizabeth, or whoever she was, wanted to break me, to use me, to leave me with nothing. Instead, she's the one who lost everything. And I'm still here, watching the waves roll in on Sullivan's Island, planning my next chapter.